This current epoch witnesses a groundbreaking occurrence in the world energy market. Let it be known that this statement bears no exaggeration. It illustrates the magnitude of the situation at hand. The unexpected yet notable action taken by Canada thoroughly astonishes Donald Trump by progressively augmenting the cost of its energy exports to the United States. And this, of course, that is already affecting very much the value of gasoline in the United States. Exactly. We are talking, friends, about an obscene amount of money that is almost $100 billion in crude oil and in products of all the derivatives of oil, according to official data from the Department of Energy. Oil, according to official data from the U.S. Department of Energy of the United States for the year 2024. Let me show you a note so that you can see more or less what we are talking about. The level of exports with which Canada closed in 2024, that we were talking about 4.3 million barrels per day in July that were going directly to the United States. Last year, we were talking about 515% compared to July, 300,000 barrels of oil per day to 890,000 barrels. That is an obscene amount of oil. And now Canada is about to say not a drop for the United States if necessary. This is not a hypothetical. In fact, this possibility of redirecting the energy market and Canada selling it to the US was already redirecting the energy market allows Canada to sell its gas and oil, not only to the United States, but also elsewhere. It is not specifically towards the United States, but towards Europe. Take a glance at this concept. The idea had been suggested by Pierre Poilievre a few months ago.
The same goes for our resource sector. I mean, why is it that we're still importing oil when we've got the world's third biggest supply? Why is it we can't export our natural gas overseas?
You mean like to Germany and Japan, even when they ask?
Exactly.
Well, Germany and Japan, instead of other places. In the United States, for example, we are not just talking about gasoline. Ontario, we had already talked about. Ontario is the energy lung. Eastern Canada is not only an important region in terms of electricity supply, but it also holds significance for areas such as New York in the United States. Michigan, Minnesota, because they have just suffered a 25% increase in electricity exported to the United States. And the threat alone alarmed Trump to such a level, he had to exert an extraordinary effort, going as far as moving heaven, earth, and sea to prevent this disastrous blow. We were dealing with over 1.5 million American households facing the prospect of soaring electricity bills. This gave us just a small glimpse of what was to come, my friends. Of the level of power that Canada has over energy in the United States. And now, we are witnessing an unexpected geopolitical situation that was once unimaginable. This idea was accurately described by Pierre Poilievre. The individual you observed is the person that personified this concept. Translated into Spanish is the leader of the Conservatives. He is, let's say, the opposition of Justin Trudeau's party, who, well, fortunately is no longer here, but, well, it's the Liberals. And, well, now there is more resurgence of this threat in which Canada is demonstrating its energy muscle directly and without fear of retaliation. Due to its reduced dependence on the U.S. market, it has diversified its customer base. The country considers diversification a possibility, contemplating the idea of selling its gas to Germany or Japan upon request. This potential move was first suggested by Pierre Poilievre, who questioned why not explore such opportunities. Because it was the United States that had subjugated Canada's energy interests through its bishops. And well, it is becoming apparent through the involvement of these bishops that Canada has suppressed its energy potential. Similarly, Mexico has long been subjected to the United States' exploitation. Mexico exported crude oil to the U.S. for its needs. Why didn't Mexico take the initiative to refine its own fuel instead of relying on other countries? Additionally, why did it opt to export crude oil for refining rather than doing it domestically? Well, because the United States always Mexico subjected its energy interests to external pressure, preventing us from constructing our own refineries and making us reliant on them. Undoubtedly, corruption and collusion were widespread in this matter of the United States. With Mexico, with dirty Mexican politicians, so that we would not develop our own refineries and continue to depend on them. Just take a look, by the way, at what this Bloomberg Energy article Just from 2024, it says that Canada exported 3.8 million barrels of oil per day. 3.8 million barrels of crude oil to the United States. That, my friends, to give you an idea, 52% of all oil imports to the United States amount to approximately 52% of the total U.S. oil imports. Or 52%, $103 billion a year in dollars. Well, now all that dependence that Trump says he doesn't need anything from Canada, lies. Look, there it is. There's all the gossip Donald Trump drops. And here are more sources of the effects that this is happening, that this is producing. This is the falsehood of Trump unraveling. He does require the demand for Canadian oil is not only necessary, but also essential. And now that 52% may get out of hand and he keeps going the way he's going. It's a gigantic mistake. Now, what really motivated this radical change in Canada? Despite the superficial narrative on trade disputes involving tariffs in recent times, there is much more to the issue than meets the eye. What's happening, everyone? There are deeper underlying causes for this. And notice that this is a reality, that if we uncover the sewer here in Canada, we are going to find many interests just as corrupt as those in Mexico. Mexico, which for years refused to invest in refineries in order to continue buying gasoline from the United States instead of doing it, in the country itself, it was foolish. Why, if you have the crude oil, do you give it to the United States and then buy it from them in the form of gasoline? Why spend money and depend on another country? Because there are always interests, and the United States has always put politicians in place or to not defend the energy sovereignty of our countries. It is worthwhile, by the way, now that it is in the debate, that I show you this video of a debate that Pierre Poilievre, who is the leader of the opposition here in Canada of the Conservatives, with the new face of the Liberals, because now many are saying that the one replacing Justin Trudeau, Mark Carney, because he is the packaging of the same product in various forms serves as mere camouflage for Liberals, and it would be remiss to ignore the energy-related actions undertaken by Liberals right here in Canada. They have essentially emulated the strategies employed by Peña Nieto and predecessors in Mexico, fostering a detrimental reliance on the United States. In the event that we currently find ourselves economically dependent on our neighbors to the south, a substantial portion of blame should be attributed to Liberals. I implore you to actively engage in this debate, as it provides an invaluable opportunity to witness the genuine nature of our circumstances.
Do you support the Prime Minister's decision to veto the Northern Gateway pipeline, Mr. Carney?
I understand the veto of the Northern Gateway pipeline.
You support it?
Given both environmental and commercial reasons.
Do you support it?
I think it was sensible. I wasn't involved in the decision, but I think it was the right decision.
And yet your company has invested billions of dollars in oil companies in both Brazil and the UAE to buy pipelines. You bought billions of dollars of pipelines as a company in the last 5 years. Do you support those investments?
Mr. Poilievre, there is a global energy system, and one of the issues, I'm trying to explain a bit of how the economy works. One of the
Thank you so much.
It may help. One of the issues for this committee in thinking about a sustainable transition.
Do you support it?
Where is Canada's role in those as energy transitions from fossil fuels to renewables? And in different jurisdictions, into different geography, it matters. It matters, and this is a fundamental point.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. This is a fundamental. You're
finally
finally getting to a point
you've exceeded
that
the
is
time.
Relevant to this committee's inquiry.
What you're saying is you oppose pipelines in Canada, but you support them in the UAE and in Brazil. That's what you've actually said.
There are specific.
That's your double standard.
It is not a double standard.
It is a double standard.
No, it's not.
You make billions of dollars off foreign pipelines, and you shut them down here at home, putting our people out of work.
That you are a representative of the Canadian people, and one of your responsibilities, including at this committee,
is to fight for Canadian jobs, and not foreign jobs like you.
Exactly, to fight for Canadian jobs, and the types of Canadian jobs that are durable and are going to move forward.
Right.
I grew up in Alberta. I know the innovative nature of that.
Well, go try to give that answer back in Alberta, because I grew up there too, and I can tell you the people. I can tell you the people of Alberta would be ashamed with the answer you just gave. That you would give billions of dollars to foreign pipelines while not allowing Canadians to build pipelines here at home. That is the kind of elite Davos hypocrisy.
Continue, Mr. Polyev.
Thank you, Mr. Carney. You've just said you support your leader's decision to kill a Western Canadian pipeline that ships the most ethical product in the world. Yet you also support your company's decision to invest billions of dollars in foreign pipelines in Brazil and in the UAE. It's clear that this is not about the environment. If it were, you'd be consistent and you'd oppose fossil fuels everywhere. But you're happy to profit off of foreign fossil fuel companies while killing jobs among our own people. How do you address that flagrant hypocrisy? It smacks of the Davos elite at its worst.
Okay. First thing, absolutely, I support Canadian jobs, and I support Canadian jobs today and tomorrow. And in order to have those jobs tomorrow, what we need and what this committee can contribute is an energy transition. The Canadian fossil fuels, Canadian companies will play an essential role. Brookfield itself is heavily invested in Canada, including in energy infrastructure for fossil fuels. But it's also, and we connect collectively as Canadians, and we look to our parliament to support this, need to be putting in place the energies and industries of the future. That means carbon capture and storage. That means blue hydrogen. And both of which are absolutely essential for Canadian jobs in my home province of Alberta. And that's where the future lies. Now, we need to have the overall picture, which is why, and I'll finish with this, Chair, I emphasize the clear pathways, walking back from that, not jumping on specifics and not seeing the bigger picture, nor providing the support that Canadians deserve.
Thank you.
That's the solution. Watch out for this. It's just that Canada has not been able to develop its energy system or its oil potential, because there is always someone who prevents it. And it is the Liberals who are supported by none other than Justin Trudeau, as evidenced by the endorsement of Mark Carney. And with that, thousands of Canadian jobs were lost. And you know what? That's a win for the United States. Due to our ongoing subordination to the energy interests of the United States, we remain beholden to their power. Mark Carney says he supported the cancellation of this very important Canadian pipeline because of ethical and environmental concerns, while his companies are making billions of dollars in the United Arab Emirates and Brazil building pipelines. Of course, it's a double standard, folks. Of course, it's a double standard. Mark Carney, the new Canadian Prime Minister, who has spent more than 10 years living in New York and the United Kingdom and very little time in the United States, who has rarely set foot in Canada, and who seems more interested in making money on foreign pipelines and canceling Canada's pipelines. And that brings us to a situation where we are dependent at the end of the day on the United States for energy, on the United States in the energy issue. For many decades, Mexico witnessed a similar occurrence where the PRI and the PAN neglected to allocate sufficient investments towards refineries. Do you recall the instance when the announcement for the development of the first new refineries was made within the past 6 years? And Ricardo Anaya and company came out to criticize that investment, saying that it was the dumbest business in the world, that the future of energy was renewable energies, that nobody was going to make money from oil anymore. Ricardo Anaya's speech has aged so badly, hasn't it? Now, precisely the big problem, and by the way, Ricardo Anaya said those words from the United States, where he lived, because he did not live in Mexico, and Mark Carney supports precisely the cancellation of the oil pipeline through. One of the major concerns here is Justin Trudeau, who used to reside in New York. However, it is gratifying to note that he has now returned to Canada after a considerable period, which had been building these serious and sustainable alternatives for years, by the way, on a long-term basis, because these are multi-billion-dollar projects, like this pipeline called Coastal Gas Link. The text is, a link connecting Alberta with LNG export terminals, transmitting liquefied natural gas. In British Columbia, for example, a network of pipelines is also being built. And the big problem is that the Liberals have cancelled it. Why? They say because of the environment. However, I am curious as to why they are investing billions of dollars in the United Arab Emirates and Brazil for these same projects if their concern is truly for the environment, as Pierre Polier once pointed out. This revelation questions their motives. It's pure hypocrisy. We are talking about more than $40 billion with Canada, up to 2045 in investments in these pipelines. That is why it is very important to defend this here in Canada. Of course, the United States is very concerned about this. Because if Canada succeeds in developing it, then if we do not want even a drop of that oil to go to the United States, nothing. Simultaneously, Europe is gradually approaching Canada, bringing the two continents closer together. After they have less energy because of the isolation they have made with Russian oil, Germany has just recently signed a memorandum with Canada. A memorandum with Canada worth $25 billion. What for? To import green hydrogen produced in Alberta. Alberta's potential is tremendous. And if Europe needs anything right now, it is oil that it used to buy from the United States. But with these sanctions, it is going to need to buy it from someone else. And Canada is saying, well, not a drop more? Well then, not a drop more. Not a drop more for the United States. And we are going to sell it to reliable trading partners like Europe. Donald Trump is worried because this, my friends, has very big implications, far beyond what appears at first glance. Why? Because these refineries that are being developed, located on the Gulf Coast, the refineries in the Midways, are purpose-built to handle heavy Canadian crude. Should Canada fail to supply this oil to the US, it would undoubtedly have adverse consequences for those refineries. Are broke. Without massive investments worth billions of dollars, it is impossible for them to swiftly substitute the current supply with light oil from Texas or other sources. As a consequence, the US refineries are on the verge of collapse. Do you know why Mexico ended up selling this refinery in Texas to the United States? Because in the end, Mexico already had enough refineries to do it on its own. And then that Texas refinery was not worth a penny without Mexican oil, without Mexican crude. And the best deal they could do was to sell it to Mexico because it was designed for Mexican oil, not for oil in the United States. Therefore, my dear companions, that is exactly the event that will occur with this action. With this move that is now looming on the horizon. There is an analysis by Wood Mackenzie, precisely from November 2024, that you can review, which speaks precisely of this Canadian decision to redirect all its oil to Europe. Now it is becoming clearer that Europe is receiving all the oil from the United States, which in turn is causing a significant increase in the price of oil for the United States. This not only deals a harsh economic blow to Donald Trump, but also has wider implications. This is also a structural energy crisis for the United States that they are not going to solve in the short term. And medium term. This is truly a significant issue in many ways. For Washington, significantly huge in a strategic manner, because it is a move that places the United States in a tremendously difficult position at this time. At this moment, they only have 3 options. And all of those options are aimed precisely at Canada. Look, first, what can you do? One possibility is, first, make an effort to mend relationships with Canada. How? Well, by backing off on the tariff issue, because it's a check on the White House. The problem is that, Trudeau and now Mark Carney have already said publicly that the trade relations, they are never going to be what they were before, that there is no longer trust with the United States. That trust has been lost. Even Mark Carney this week spoke of a betrayal. He said that we have already overcome the shock of the betrayal. From whom? From the United States. I mean, what is it for the Prime Minister? What about the United States administration? Traitors, Mark Carney said. Even if the tariffs were removed today, Canada no longer trusts. The second possibility you have here is massively accelerate their domestic oil and gas production. How? Through fracking, which, by the way, that's why Donald Trump is already raising it. The big problem with fracking, my friends, one evident challenge is that it poses various environmental as well as legal and political hurdles. Well, we already know that Donald Trump is going to jump over that, don't we? But there is a lot of data, for example, from the Energy Information Administration, which is called EIA for short, which says that the capacity that the United States would have through this issue of fracking would not reach even close to the volumes that Canada currently provides to the United States. In other words, there is no way. If Canada takes all its oil to Europe to sell it there and does not give a drop to Washington, they are finished. And third, a potential course of action for Donald Trump is to seek out alternative global vendors to secure supplies. But tell me who? Mexico? What Mexico is going to do to the United States is to say, no, I am not selling you crude oil, I am selling you gasoline. Because I have just inaugurated some new refineries. So I am not going to sell you crude oil so that you can buy it from me, so that I can buy it in gasoline. I sell you ready-made gasoline, and that is more expensive. In addition, you also have another open front with Mexico. Well, I could get a blend of heavy crude from Venezuela. The big problem is that you just had a fight with them. You know who else has this crude? Iran, and they're fighting with them. And Saudi Arabia, and they're fighting with them because of the Israel issue. So they're at odds with the whole planet. How are they going to find a solution if Canada turns off the oil tap? There's no way. There's no way, because as long as somehow, well, the United States is still debating how it is going to solve this problem. The consequences in the real economy are already being felt. There you have it. Since January, oil futures have already reacted violently to all this uncertainty. The prices of everything are going up in the United States. There is inflation, of course. There is talk of up to 15% on the international markets. Why is that? Well, since Ontario starts with the retaliatory tariffs, the implementation of retaliatory tariffs was followed by the reinstatement of the tariffs on April 2nd. Everything starts to escalate. Even JP Morgan analysts in that article I was showing you from Bloomberg say that what is this going to end in? In light of a potential surge of around 30% in fuel expenses, including both gasoline and diesel, the prices are expected to rise in the coming months. In other words, in practical terms, the average American society is going to suffer the most. Well, there you have it. They are the ones who are going to pay the most for things as simple as putting gas in their car. Hey, I don't have a car. Paying the bus fare. The heating in your houses, the electricity, the cost of everything, because you know that when gasoline goes up in price, everything goes to heaven. Eggs, milk, bread, cereal, everything. That is why the consumer price indexes for February. What does the phrase, what does it mean? Well, an upward spike. Imply? To put it simply, it signifies a sudden increase. In other words, bad news, inflation is certain. Data from the Federal Reserve itself, because of the fear of many things, among which is that Canada will turn off the tap. And in the middle of all this, by the way, for good measure, China. China, which is making the most of this opportunity. Beijing, which has multiplied its contracts with Canada. This is little talked about, eh? Little is said about this, but China is doing a lot of business with Canada for the supply of heavy crude oil and liquefied natural gas on a long-term basis. Right in the middle of this bilateral crisis between Canada and the United States. And then data from the Financial Times. China's purchases of Canadian crude oil have surged by 34% compared to the same period last year. It's not a mere coincidence, but rather a strategic move. Notably, Germany has also joined the game by pointing out that Canada should leverage this growing demand from China since it's already selling more. Then sell more to me, and Japan and all of Europe. Why is that? Because, let's see, Europe has completely cut off the consumption of Russian gas and oil, but they need a lot of it. They were buying it from the United States, but they are fighting with them. Or rather, the United States is fighting with Europe, but not with Canada. And Canada is saying that if I stop selling to the United States, it would be no good for me. On the other hand, the Europeans want to do business. For all these reasons, my friends, this decision by Canada, it's not for free. This has 20 charts in total. It's an explicit statement about how is a total lie. What Donald Trump says that he doesn't need anything from Canada because they have everything. If they had it all, then why would we be talking about this kind of thing? Why these reactions? Just look at the data from the close of the year 2024. Not only does it need, it depends. It depends on the Canadian crude oil, and also on the Mexican crude in order to survive. By the way, if you like this type of analysis, we invite you to subscribe as always to the channel, because here we are always talking about these things that are worth analyzing. Erico says that everything is happening because of those little trumpets that, yes, they are fighting even with their lifelong friends, even with their longtime allies. The allies' support stands strong even now. They no longer have friends. They no longer have allies. No one believes or trusts or likes anyone because this gentleman is fighting with everyone. Gorita's Toys says we do not consume at Walmart. Now, if they want to invest in Mexico with cheap labor, sure. Greetings to my beautiful Salvador, until El Salvador. Fernando del Cabo. Victor, he who does not want to understand will never understand, says Meita Martinez. Yes. Christian Kedrov says, can you imagine if Ricardo Anaya were president in Mexico? Oh, God forbid. No, man, just imagine. That's all. No, it would be better not to imagine. Alejandro Jaramillo mentions Canadian oil as well, in addition to Canada. No longer sells a single liquor to the United States from the United States. Yes? In LCBOs, it is now impossible to accidentally stumble upon any alcohol imported from the United States. Really, if you go to at least the Subies, the No Frills, you don't find a single thing from the United States. It's unbelievable. You used to see tomato, chili, avocado, it said US product, nothing. They have taken everything away. Because they know that people are not going to buy it and it is going to spoil, it is going to rot there on the shelf. So, there are the consequences, and this is just beginning. So, we'll catch you on the upcoming podcast. Make sure to subscribe and keep yourself updated.